I love films, especially obscure films, so here's a little review of 4 academic and 4 anti-academic films, with one honorable mention, asking the question, which is the better movie? You can disagree with a film and still like it. In fact, a film can make no sense and still be a good movie. First, I'd like to ask, what is the difference between an academic and an anti-academic film? The novel The Catcher in the Rye, which was banned from schools in the early 1960s, begins with its protagonist, Holden Caulfield, being kicked out of school. Yet he bids farewell to one of his professors with no hard feelings. So he is a well-mannered delinquent. His story is that of a delinquent who studies society. It was banned for giving the wrong message, which apparently is that delinquents have no story to tell. Therefore, it's a novel with some anti-academic tones, unlike Émile by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which is a manifesto. That is what films do. They turn a serious subject into an entertainment, or should I say, they turn it into whatever the author wishes. These are all good films which serve a purpose by either making us think, making us laugh, or presenting a gritty subject in a more palatable way, much like education itself. Like Jack Kerouac and the Beat Poets, J.D. Salinger's character is a failure except in the English language, much like a jazz musician. Creative writing encourages the study of delinquents, villains, anarchists, controversial subjects, and self-determination. Since I don't really empathize with overachievers as much as tortured geniuses who make sacrifices for their art, I could easily say those are more likely to be better writers, but there are many overachievers in the film industry. 1962's The Miracle Worker, the true story of Helen Keller, has no classroom, no textbooks, and no scores. It's about the primordial beginnings of education. This movie is hard for some people to watch, about a girl trapped in darkness and silence. What struck me is when Helen's teacher, Anne Sullivan, insists on separating Helen from her parents, giving her absolute control, which is what every teacher wants, saying she wants her to succeed even though she's not even the one who loves her. In her autobiography, Helen Keller describes her father as the kindest man she ever knew. He asks Anne Sullivan, "Don't you have any pity?" To which Sean Connery would say, "Well, perhaps that's the nature of my pity." The spare the rod, spoil the child discussion is endless. In the military, a pragmatist with no emotional distractions has advantages on the battlefield, but in civilian life may have difficulties as an individual. All is vanity, as King Solomon would say. One opinion is vanity, and the other is also vanity. What tips the scales in the direction of academics is Anne Sullivan's methods worked. What tips them in the other direction is most adults are inept. The discussions they have are inept, saying, "I want my child to accomplish these things so they follow the right example," when they've already given them a bad example. And number 2, someone doesn't necessarily have a bad attitude because they're spoiled. It could be the person they are on the inside comes out when they are advantaged or disadvantaged. In the movie Pollyanna, Pollyanna has 2 guardians, one who wants to leave her his entire fortune, and one who's a strict disciplinarian. But the child's personality is so pure and good, it makes no difference which example is given, because she would do the same things. In fact, a child should make adults examine themselves. So what you have is people congratulating a method when it's the strength of the individual that succeeds regardless of the circumstances. 1967's To Sir with Love, starring Sidney Poitier, is about a substitute teacher who is faced with a bunch of delinquents, where despite the fact that he's not even supposed to be there, he succeeds with them simply by the strength of his personality. Sidney Poitier himself got his start playing a delinquent in the movie Blackboard Jungle, where the delinquents have control of the school, in which he has musical talent in spite of being a delinquent. Likewise, Stand and Deliver is the true story of math teacher Jaime Escalante, who has to teach calculus at night despite it not being the job he was hired for. This movie tops my list of academic films because, despite being a disciplinarian, Escalante is cool and shares a cultural connection with his students, saying, "Tell me what -1 + 1 equals, or I'll break your neck like a toothpick." Lou Diamond Phillips' character is my favorite because, despite being too cool for school, he aces the placement test just because he can, which to me is an ideal student who has mastered both sides of his life. 1989's Lean on Me, starring Morgan Freeman, gets the lowest score on this list. It's about a principal who is simply there to whip a struggling high school back into shape and take names. A very one-sided procedural film. Although, when he corners some delinquents in the bathroom and makes them sing the school song, they do surprise him by busting into their own a cappella version, leaving him speechless. Because when an enforcer is beaten at their own game, they have to respect it. Good Will Hunting is probably the best anti-academic film most people are familiar with. It's one of the most intelligent films I've ever seen. Skylar is such a cool girlfriend, it's almost disgusting. I didn't appreciate this film when I was younger because I thought it was a battle of wits between Matt Damon and Robin Williams, in which Robin Williams eventually wins by making Matt Damon break down as a punishment for being a square wheel. In reality, the question of whether he succeeds or not is left unanswered because it's inconsequential to him. Or at least he's succeeded in his own peace of mind, after showing the school system the things it stands on are meaningless. Leaving things unresolved is the best ending for an anarchist or a moral antagonist because it denies the system what it wants. I want Minnie Driver to be fat, but it's unrealistic if he achieves everything he wants. The 1968 British film If, starring Malcolm McDowell, is the most obscure film on this list. The entire movie takes place in a boys' boarding school where the upperclassmen use corporal punishment as a preview of adult life, saying, "I wear the badge of the state," to which Malcolm replies, "You mean that bit of wool on your tit?" After they beat him mercilessly, Malcolm has the presence of mind to shake his hand and thank him. At the beginning of the film, he returns from break sporting a mustache, and that mustache is the only sign of the outside world that we see until the ending when Malcolm and his friends discover an old World War II stockpile and his girlfriend shoots the schoolmaster. National Lampoon's Animal House is a brazen anti-academic comedy where the school dean is an absolute louse, as is the school's #1 fraternity. This is the closest film to my own college experience, with the exception that academicians don't or can't tolerate not getting what they want in any situation, from the lowest grunt to the head of the department. Anything that gets in the way is steamrolled out of existence. The happy ending is sheer chaos with some imaginary superlatives. Donnie Darko is an exposé of 1980s high school education. A friend once told me Donnie reminds them of me in high school. Donnie's English teacher is fired for teaching Graham Greene's The Destructors, and when Donnie tries to have a conversation about God with his science teacher, he too tells him he could lose his job. Donnie turns out to be the one responsible for flooding and vandalizing the school with the help of his imaginary friend Frank, who is a direct reference to the Black Rabbit of Inlay, presumably while the real Frank is still alive and inconsequential to the plot, since he and Donnie don't seem to know each other. Mr. Holland's Opus, the favorite film of all music teachers, has both academic and anti-academic notes. What disturbed me was the scene where he threatens to flunk a student who is gifted just because he's not interested in the class, and that same student shows up at his retirement party as if to thank him. I find this unrealistic. The teachers that made the best impression on me were the ones that didn't hold it against me. On the other hand, there's a student-teacher relationship in the film, and the scene where Mr. Holland says to the school board, "Your best isn't good enough." It is ultimately, however, an academic film because it presents the philosophy that the school system is bad for cutting art and music programs, but some teachers are good even though they perpetuate that system, making sure people don't question it. In my video, The Anti-Academic Doctrine, I said academics are constantly at war with each other to control the message that there is nobody else. Disciplinarians are the students who were bullied or are unsuccessful in their personal relationships. I was in band all 7 years of middle and high school, and our band director was named Teacher of the Year, despite him being a slave driver and our playing the same music every year. The first chairs were constantly challenging each other in a game of one-upsmanship. I didn't look up to them, I felt sorry for them. It could be the teacher was beloved and had a good relationship with some of his students. I just never got to see that side of him. I'd like to add that directors themselves are not educators or anarchists. They have to be highly organized. Movies directed by an anarchist are not good films. So, which of these do you think is better art? Are there any films that should have made this list you would recommend? Post in the comments below.